Today I'm wearing victory rolls because of the subject of today's book.
Emma's been reading about World War II.
I have a lot of books about World War II.
So she's dressed up her hair to match the 40s.
Actually, I did this morning because I went for like a 40s, 50s theme for Memorial Day.
Is Rosie the Riveter your hero? If you don't know, when the men went off to war, the women went to work in the factories, and Rosie the Riveter became the symbol of women stepping in to do what was needed while the men were away.
Yes, and she always posed like this, and she had a little tie in her hair with victory rolls.
Yes, and that was often considered the last just war because we were fighting a very visible and obvious enemy who clearly wanted to destroy us. And who would that be?
Nazi Germany.
And Italy and Japan.
Yes. They started it.
It's a little deeper than that. And we're drinking tea today also?
Yes. So today we have ripened sticky rice scent mini Puerh torcha.
What do we have? Oh, it comes in a little coin wrapper.
Oh, I love pretty tea. No, shut.
So this one has rice in it. Is that right?
It is rice scented.
Rice
Whether that means it
scented.
actually has rice in it or not, I don't know.
It was in the presence of rice at some point.
Yes. Once in the presence of
And
rice.
Tuo cha is a little piece of tea,
Which way is that?
just right for one pot.
This is where that goes. I like to decorate with the stickers they send.
Yes, okay. She's going to put her little Tuo cha into
Interesting.
her little teapot. Oh, did it crack a little?
No, it's supposed to be like that. It has a
Oh.
ridge.
Oh. Look at there.
Wait,
It's got a
is there
little
two
ridge
of
in
them?
it. So that you could split it if you wanted.
Yeah, but it's still, that's the whole serving.
It's one serving.
It's just fancy.
I smell rice.
That smells very interesting.
Ricey.
So the subject of World War II and all of the world wars, and really just the proxy wars too, has always, well, it hasn't always been, but it's been a subject that for several years I've been very interested in.
Now, go back to what a proxy war is.
A proxy war is a war that was fought by the U.S., not on United States soil, but it was different from, say, fighting in Germany during World War II or in France during World War II. It was fighting another power not in their country. So two powers were fighting over a country neither of them controlled at the moment. For instance, Korea, North Korea versus South Korea.
So we're getting involved in two powers and deciding which one we like.
Yes, so the proxy wars happened after World War II because technically World War II did not end everything. The fact that communism had been such a big thing during the world wars made the whole world a little, not the whole world, but it made especially the United States a little bit concerned that communism was going to continue to spread after the war was over. So they began fighting in these proxy wars with places like the Soviet Union over the freedom of these people. And actually, a TV drama about one of the proxy wars, MASH, which was about the Korean War, sort of started my interest in war. This is an anthology, so it's writers on World War II, and it's mostly excerpts from memoirs, poems, books about people, but there are some fictionalized tales based on real events. One that I particularly wanted to share is from Washington Goes to War. Also, Sir Harold George Nicholson is featured several times in this book, and I actually found a book of all of his diary entries and letters from the time between 39 and 45, or 30 and 40 and 45, that was compiled by his son. So I will at some point read that and review that because I have the complete collection of Sir Harold George Nicholson's diaries and letters. But
I see Orwell.
he is the first one on there, and it is a review of Mein Kampf by George Orwell. George Orwell didn't write it, though.
Hitler wrote
just-
Mein Kampf, and
George
Orwell
Orwell.
gave his opinion on
Yeah.
Hitler's Mein Kampf.
Yes. He also did a letter to the editor of Time and Tide. Lots of different things in here. Selected letters from different people. Okay, Washington Goes to War, 120.
Is that David Brinkley?
Yes.
A well-known newsman.
So, this in particular tells about the Pentagon, which was created and built during World War II. Very quickly, though. And actually, President Roosevelt wasn't sure about the location, the shape, any of it. He wasn't really
sides.
sure what he wanted to do with it. Construction foremen were snatching blueprints off their desk before they had even finished drafting them. Alan Dickey, one of the architects, recalled another architect asking him, "How big should I make that beam across the third floor?" Dickey answered, "I don't know. They installed it yesterday."
That would be more of the newsy style.
Yes.
I saw George Bernard Shaw in there, the author of Pygmalion.
Let's see.
I did not read this, but Emma did. These are some big names.
Yeah. It was collected as an anthology in 1991. So
I see Studs Terkel. I
there's
see
William Shirer,
James Missioner.
Jessica Mitford,
W.H. Auden.
Orwell, Mortimer, by Barbara Pym,
Virginia Woolf.
Richard Hillary. Was he important? George Bernard Shaw from Collected Letters, 1926 to 1950. George Keenan.
So these are not fly-by-night authors. You'll recognize these people.
There's Virginia Woolf, who is the one who committed suicide, I think. In here, there are... Yes, so there's little sections...
Little intro for each entry.
Introductions for the authors, and for Virginia Woolf, it is the novelist, critic, and essayist Virginia Woolf was the most celebrated of the Bloomsbury group. In 1941, depressed by the war and with a history of mental breakdowns, fearful of suffering another, she committed suicide by drowning.
My goodness.
Yes, so
Okay.
this is from 1940, so it's the year before she committed suicide, but there are lots of things. There are actually pieces from people on both sides of the war. They're mostly British and American authors, but there are also some authors from Germany. I think there was one writing from Japan. So it is a pretty good collection. There's one in particular, and I don't remember the names of them, but the first piece is from a man who published war stories after or during the war, and he was approached by a soldier, and it had an excerpt of his book that the soldier wrote. And then the next piece was a longer excerpt from the book that the soldier wrote that the man from the excerpt before published. So it's a very interesting read. I've been taking it with me to the blood bank.
And why are you going to the blood bank?
She donates blood, and I sit in the waiting room and read.
They give you money as a prize.
It's something that I've just been reading casually while waiting for people to come out of doctor's appointments and things like that.
Wow.
And obviously it's on war, so it's not like a happy-go-lucky book, although there are some more humorous excerpts. I like it, though. I mean,
Smell that. That's like drinking rice. Very much like drinking rice. I think you could make a fine soup out of this. Put some fish in there and you're good.
And actually, the author of it was a kid in the 40s when this was all going on. So this foreword is his story of being a child during the 1940s, during the war, which was interesting enough in itself. I would read a whole book just by him.
Germaine Greer. Norman Mailer. Thomas Bernhard.
Mordecai Richler is the man who edited it and wrote the foreword.
Okay. Oh, Elie Wiesel, who actually was in a concentration camp and then later talked about how he was able to forgive. Now that you've learned about World War II, what are your thoughts about it?
In our history class, we would joke that during World War II, there was just a little Adolf sitting there with his military uniform on, like, wait a minute, I don't like this.
As a child?
Yes, he was a soldier. He wasn't. I don't think he was in World War One, but he was old enough to remember what happened after World War One.
Adolf Hitler capitalized on the anger of the German people because they were just kept down.
The Treaty of Versailles treated Germany very badly. I mean, they did start the war, but
Well, that World War I was about somebody being assassinated. What the
yes. So
Prince of
Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. He was Austrian, and Austro-Hungary was a place at the time, and Hungarians didn't like Austria controlling them, so the Hungarians shot Franz Ferdinand, and so the Austrians declared war on Hungary. And because of the way that the war treaties worked at the time, anyone who was involved in a treaty with Hungary or Austria had to come to their aid. And then the people involved with those countries who were coming to the aid of Hungary or Austria had to come to their aid because of the way the treaties had been signed in the early 1900s, because they hadn't expected something like a massive world war to happen. So by the time it was all finished, half of Europe was at war with the other half of Europe.
which reminds me of a Bible story. I think it's in Judges. The Israelites were doing very well. So these people who lived close by dressed themselves in rags and fasted and showed up looking hungry and weak and said, "We've come from far away to sign a treaty with you because we don't want you to attack us." And Israel signed this treaty without looking into it and ended up in an alliance with their neighbor because their neighbor had lied to them. We'll flash the location of that story up on the screen for you.
And actually, it wasn't even that they had been tricked. They had all signed alliances willingly with each other. This was before NATO or the United Nations or anything. This was just treaties that other countries had signed with countries that happened to be at war, and so then they had to go to war. And
Be careful whom you hang out with.
so by the time it was all over, again, half of Europe was at war with the other half of Europe, and it was going kind of badly by the end there, so America stepped in, got rid of their isolationism policy, joined the war, won the war, got depressed.
Meanwhile, Germany gets all the whippings and becomes very angry, and then they had some economic problems based on the Weimar government, which that was a horrible collapse. And then Hitler took over and became what you know today, the little mustache man.
And the way that he did this was actually pretty smart. He started as a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he went around for like a year. He got the trust of the German people so that they would trust him as a leader before he started actually declaring war on people. And we talked about this in history class, actually. He was invading lands long before anyone declared war, because the other countries were still in a depression, or, well, America was still in a depression, and the rest of them were just coming out of a depression, and they didn't particularly want to go to another war, so they just sort of let Hitler have his little places. They just said, okay, you can have Austria, just don't invade Poland. When he invaded Poland, they said, okay, well, just don't invade here. And when he invaded there, it continued on and on until they had no choice but to declare war on him before he took over all of Europe, which was his goal, by the way.
This is why capitulation doesn't work. And when someone asks you or forces you to do something that you know is not right, you got to say no now, because they're going to keep pushing until you do say no. So if someone is challenging your ethics, go ahead and say no now while you've still got your balance, so to speak.
And really, the way that it all happened, looking back, and my history teacher was really good about making us sort of think about this. Looking back, we can very easily say to ourselves, well, why didn't they just do this? But they were just coming out of the Depression. They were just getting off of the first war they'd fought. They didn't want to fight another war. They thought he would go away on his own. We know he didn't. but they didn't know that at the time. And by the time the war had started, there was no way to finish it without just completely having another world war. And it was not a fun time. Lots of people were killed, and tanks came, and machine guns came, and tank warfare or trench warfare went the way of the wind. And if you want to learn more, there's a metal group called Sabaton, and they write songs about it. That was another reason that I got into history. I could talk about World War II for quite a while.
She could. She loves it.
My classmates know this. For 6 months, I regaled them of tales about World War II. I even did a presentation on my great-grandfather.
I think you could do more on the other wars too, right? Mm-hmm. You know, about the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and so forth. Mm-hmm. And it's not hard to find parallels in our current situation that I'm not going to go into, but I think you can figure out.
Also, wars are commonly used to verbally fight against other wars. For instance, MASH, which I mentioned earlier, and we've mentioned this before, was a criticism of the Vietnam War while being about the Korean War. Because a criticism of the Vietnam War during the Vietnam War would not have worked.
A parable, if you will. I'll tell you a story and you figure out what's behind it. Aesop's Fables. The idea, I tell you a story and what am I really talking about? Something else. Okay, do we want to recommend this tea?
It's good.
It's from Teavivre.
Yeah, it has like a black tea, but with soup.
It'd be a good soup. I would put some canned chicken in it and it'd be pretty good.
That's an idea for supper.
Yeah. Canned chicken and rice soup.
I could
do we have enough?
I could brew a concentrate of it.
Interesting.
And Annie and I could have that for supper.
Well, a new idea. And we will try to link this book until we see you again.
Make sure to make time for tea and a good book.